If anyone had told me a few years ago that I'd be sitting here, writing out my life like it was some kind of dramatic story, I would have laughed right in their face. I wasn't the kind of guy who got tangled up in drama, and I certainly wasn't the one who found himself caught in messy situations. I had this belief that I had it all figured out, that I was in control of my life. But life, it's funny like that. It has a way of throwing you a curveball when you least expect it. Let me rewind a little. I'm not the type to wallow in self-pity, but what I'm about to share is the truth. No sugarcoating, no skipping over the hard stuff. You deserve the full story, the whole ugly truth, and maybe, just maybe, it'll help someone out there who's going through something similar. Or maybe it's just helping me get it all out. Either way, here it goes. I grew up in a typical small-town family. My dad worked long hours to keep food on the table, and my mom? She was always there, running the household like a well-oiled machine. We weren't rich, not by any means, but we were comfortable enough. My parents, though, they were old school. They believed in sticking it out no matter what. Sure, they had their fair share of arguments, but divorce? That word didn't exist in their world. Growing up, I believed marriage was forever. Once you committed, that was it. You didn't throw in the towel, and you sure as hell didn't walk away when things got tough. You worked through the rough patches, stayed loyal, and kept your promises. That's where my idea of commitment came from. And while it sounds noble on the surface, it also made me believe that anything, any relationship, could be fixed if you just tried hard enough. I thought love and effort were enough to solve any problem. That belief carried me into my first marriage. I truly believed I could make it work. Spoiler alert, I couldn't. We were young, naive, and too eager to jump headfirst into everything. Marriage, buying a house, planning for a family, we rushed it all without stopping to think. And when reality hit, money problems, constant arguments, her realizing we weren't as compatible as we thought, it all fell apart. And then came the betrayal. She left me for someone else. Someone she probably thought was more exciting or, I don't know, a better fit. And there I was, left with the mess and no idea what to do next. That was my first real taste of what it feels like to be betrayed by someone you trust. But I came out of it with this stubborn resolve. Next time, I wouldn't let myself fail. Then Sarah came into my life. Let's call her Sarah for now. We met at a party of all places. I wasn't looking for anything serious at the time. I was still recovering from my divorce, but Sarah had this energy about her. It was magnetic, pulling me in before I even realized it. She made you feel like you were the only person in the room, like nothing else mattered but what she was saying. We started slow, taking our time. Our first date wasn't anything fancy. Just dinner at this little Italian restaurant I loved. It wasn't the food that caught my attention that night. It was her. She was sharp, confident, and had this wit that kept me on my toes. I remember thinking, this could be it. This could actually go somewhere. We both had baggage, but it felt like we could handle it together. Like whatever life threw at us, we'd face it as a team. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. We had our share of rough patches, like the time I lost my job, and we had to scrape by on just her income for a while. But we pushed through it, or at least I thought we did. I believed we were solid. Looking back now, though, I can see all the red flags I ignored. I missed so many signs, convincing myself we were unshakable. Before I get into all that, though, I need to talk about someone else, my best friend, Marcus. Marcus and I go way back. We've been friends since high school, back when we thought we were invincible. He wasn't just my friend, he was like a brother to me. We did everything together. Sports, road trips, and more wild nights out than I care to admit. When my first marriage fell apart, Marcus was the one who pulled me through. He was there for me when I couldn't pick myself up. I trusted him completely with everything. Naturally, he was the first person I introduced Sarah to. The three of us got along great, and we even took a few trips together. Just some casual getaways, nothing dramatic. At least that's what I thought at the time. Now, looking back, I can't help but wonder if I missed something. If I was too blind to see what was right in front of me. For a long time, life felt good. Sarah and I had this comfortable routine, talking about the future, making plans for kids, vacations, even a bigger house. We weren't rich, but we were stable, and after everything I'd been through, I thought that was enough. I thought I'd finally made it. A stable home, a woman I loved, and a best friend who was like family. But stability can blind you. You get so caught up in the day-to-day, in the routines and the plans, that you don't see the cracks forming underneath it all. We spent Sundays binge-watching shows, brainstorming baby names, and dreaming about the life we wanted to build. I was naive enough to believe that stability meant everything was fine. But stability? It's a lie. When everything beneath the surface starts shifting, you don't always notice it right away. And yeah, I know you're probably wondering when things started to go downhill. But here's the thing. At first, it doesn't feel like anything is wrong. You don't see betrayal coming because, deep down, you don't want to. I didn't. And with Marcus, we were so close that I just figured if something was off, he'd tell me. He always had my back just like I had his. I never imagined for a second that my best friend and my wife. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. There were small things, little details that now, looking back, practically scream red flag. At the time, though, I was too busy with my perfect little life to notice. For now, just know this, things weren't as picture perfect as I made them out to be. You know how people say when something's wrong, you can feel it in your gut? Like there's this nagging sense that something's off even if, on the surface, everything looks fine? That's exactly what happened to me. And the worst part? It didn't hit all at once. It crept up on me slowly, like a shadow stretching longer and darker until it's impossible to ignore. At first, it wasn't anything major, just little things. Tiny changes that, by themselves, might seem harmless. But they started to pile up, and that's when I noticed Sarah wasn't acting like herself. The first time it really hit me, I remember it clearly. Sarah became obsessed with her phone. Now, before that, we were the kind of couple who shared everything, texts, funny memes, random pictures. But suddenly, she started keeping things to herself. She got secretive. I'd notice her tilting her phone away from me when I walked by or locking it the second I sat down beside her. Maybe it sounds paranoid, but when you've been with someone for years, you notice these little shifts. It's like when someone treats their phone like it's some kind of treasure chest holding all their secrets. Then came the late nights at work. At first, I didn't think much of it. Late nights in marketing weren't exactly uncommon. But they started happening more and more often. She'd come home smelling like perfume I didn't recognize. Her hair and makeup still looking freshly done. Not exactly the look of someone slogging through spreadsheets or presentations all evening. I'd ask her about her day, try to start some casual conversation, but she'd brush me off with a tired smile and head straight to bed. I'd sit in the living room alone, staring at the TV but not really watching. This growing unease eating away at me. I'll never forget the night it all started to click. She came home ridiculously late, and there I was, sitting in the dark like something out of a bad movie. When she walked in, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Where the hell have you been?" I asked. She rolled her eyes like I was some overreacting idiot. "I told you, I had a late meeting," she said, kicking off her heels and heading straight for the bathroom. But this time I couldn't let it slide. "A meeting? At midnight?" I pushed, my voice rising. "Come on, Sarah. What's really going on?" She didn't even turn to look at me. "Work's stressful right now. You know how it is. Can we not do this tonight?" That became her go-to line, "Work's stressful." Maybe it was true. Maybe I was just reading too much into things. But the way she said it, the way she avoided even looking at me, didn't sit right. And then there was Marcus. This guy had been my best friend for years, through thick and thin. But lately, something was different. He started pulling away. No more fishing trips on the weekends, no more beers after work. He always had an excuse. Too busy with work, family stuff, you name it. When we did hang out, he wasn't really there. He'd drift off mid-conversation, like his mind was somewhere else. Our other friends noticed it too. One night, after a few beers, one of them said, "What's up with Marcus lately? He's been acting strange." I laughed it off, said something about work stress. But deep down, it stuck with me. Was something going on? Was Marcus hiding something from me too? I tried to brush it off, tell myself I was overthinking things. But as time went on, it got harder and harder to ignore. Sarah wasn't just acting differently. She was locking me out. Literally. She changed her phone password. Now, I get that couples don't need to share everything, but we never had secrets before. We trusted each other completely, or at least I thought we did. And now? Felt like I wasn't even a part of her life anymore. I tried talking to her about it. I really did. One night after dinner, I sat her down and said, "Look, I know things are crazy at work, but you've been acting distant lately. I just want to know if everything's okay." She didn't hesitate. "It's just stress. You don't need to worry about it," she said. But I wasn't fine. I was drowning in doubt, feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. Every time I tried to get her to open up, it was the same story. "It's just work.
I'm tired.
Nothing's wrong. You're overthinking it." It wasn't just the words she said. It was how she said them. There was this flatness in her voice, like she was reading off a script, rehearsed and detached. I could feel something wasn't right, but I didn't have any real proof. And yeah, I started checking her phone. I'm not proud of it, but what else was I supposed to do? I had to know if I was losing my mind or if there was something real behind all these feelings. Every time I looked, though, I found nothing. No incriminating texts, no suspicious photos, just the usual boring work emails and harmless group chats. But the more I checked, the more convinced I became that I was missing something, that the truth was slipping through my fingers. Then one night, after yet another late meeting, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I asked her, flat out, "Are you cheating on me?" She froze, just for a split second, so brief I almost missed it, but it was long enough for me to catch it. Then, like a switch had been flipped, she turned around with this exasperated look on her face and said, "Seriously? You're accusing me of that? After everything we've been through?" Her words stung, but it wasn't the words themselves. It was how she said them. Too perfect, too rehearsed. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But deep down, I knew. I knew she was lying. And Marcus? Well, he'd been lying too. I wasn't just losing my wife. I was losing my best friend. But instead of confronting them, I stayed quiet. I did what anyone in my position might do. I watched, I waited, and I started keeping track. Every excuse, every late night, every odd look or unexplained absence. I stored them all away. I didn't let on that I knew something was wrong, but in the back of my mind, I was piecing it all together. It was like building an invisible wall between us, brick by brick, because I knew that when the truth finally came out, I needed to be ready for it. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to be wrong. I clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, it was all in my head. But when the signs are slapping you in the face, there's only so much you can ignore. The final push, the thing that really shattered my hope, was a family dinner. Sarah had always been big on family. She loved organizing these Sunday gatherings with both our families, where we'd eat, laugh, and just enjoy each other's company. We'd been planning this one for weeks. Nothing fancy, just a simple dinner with our parents and a few cousins. But the afternoon of the dinner, Sarah suddenly announced she had a work emergency. Not just any emergency, one that required her to cancel the entire evening. "Something came up at work," she said, brushing me off like it was no big deal. That was it. That was my breaking point. I called Marcus, thinking maybe we could at least grab a beer or blow off some steam. But he didn't answer. Not once. I texted, left a voicemail, even checked his social media. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished. And in that moment, I knew. I didn't have proof yet, but in my gut, I knew something was going on. The next morning, I made the call. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial the number for a private investigator. It felt like I was crossing a line I could never come back from. But at that point, I was desperate. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, with the constant gnawing uncertainty eating away at me. The investigator's name was Kevin. He was nothing special, just a regular guy, exactly what I needed. We met at a quiet coffee shop across town, far from anyone who might recognize me. I laid it all out for him, the strange behavior, the excuses, the little things that didn't add up. Kevin didn't blink. He just listened, taking notes like this was just another day at work. I remember asking, "How long do you think it'll take to figure this out?" Kevin didn't hesitate, still scribbling away in his notebook. "Depends. Some cases wrap up in a few days. Others take weeks. But don't worry, if something's going on, we'll find it. That if was the only thing keeping me sane. It gave me a sliver of hope, just enough to convince myself that maybe, somehow, I was wrong. Maybe Sarah really was just stressed. Maybe Marcus really was just busy. But deep down, I knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to face it. It didn't take long. 3 days later, Kevin called me. His voice was calm, detached, like he was used to delivering bad news. "You might want to meet up," he said. "I've got something you need to see." We met at the same coffee shop. Kevin slid a manila envelope across the table. I stared at it, my stomach twisting into knots. I wasn't ready for what I knew was inside, but I couldn't put it off any longer. My hands trembled as I opened it, and what I saw made me feel like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Photos. Crisp, high-quality images of Sarah and Marcus. Not just casual pictures either, photos of them holding hands at a restaurant, walking into a hotel together, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. Like they used to laugh with me. But it wasn't just the photos. Kevin had dug deeper. There were screenshots of their texts, conversations that left no doubt about what was happening. And then, the kicker, a video from a hotel security camera. Sarah and Marcus, arm in arm, disappearing behind a door. Couldn't breathe. I felt like I was going to throw up. I didn't want to look at it, but I had to. The proof was right there in front of me, undeniable and brutal. Sarah, the woman I had built my life with, and Marcus, my best friend, the guy I trusted more than anyone else. They had both betrayed me in the worst way possible. I sat there, staring at the photos, unable to process what I was seeing. Kevin didn't say much. He just gave me the space to sit in silence and let it all sink in. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I managed to ask Kevin, "How long has this been going on?" He shrugged. "A few months. Maybe longer. They've been sneaking around for a while." Months. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. I could feel the rage bubbling up inside me, threatening to boil over. I wanted to smash something, to drive straight to their faces and confront them both, demanding answers right there and then. But I didn't. Instead, I thanked Kevin, shoved the envelope into my bag, and left the coffee shop in a daze. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced, replaying everything I'd just seen, every moment of their betrayal. The anger didn't take long to catch up with me. It wasn't just Sarah. What she'd done cut deep, deeper than I thought possible. But Marcus, that betrayal was something else entirely. He wasn't just my best friend. He was like family, someone I trusted with everything. And he'd stabbed me in the back, thinking I'd never figure it out. But he was wrong. They both were. And they weren't going to get away with it. That's when the plan started to take shape in my mind. I wasn't going to confront them in some emotional outburst, screaming and yelling like some soap opera. No, I was going to be smarter than that. I'd hit them where it would hurt the most. For Sarah, that meant our marriage. For Marcus, that meant his career. Marcus worked for a prominent company, the kind of place where reputation was everything. He was always bragging about how flawless his career was, how he was next in line for a big promotion, how he was the company's golden child. That's where I'd strike, right at the core of what mattered most to him. The first step was gathering more evidence. I already had plenty from Kevin, but I needed more. Something airtight, something they couldn't deny. So, I hired Kevin for another week, instructing him to dig up everything he could. It wasn't difficult. They were careless, reckless even, assuming they'd never get caught. More dinners, more hotels, even a weekend getaway. They acted like they didn't care who saw them. Once I had everything I needed, I started making my move. Marcus's company had strict codes of conduct, especially when it came to personal scandals. I knew if I played my cards right, I could bring his entire career crashing down with just a few well-timed leaks. I carefully wrote up an anonymous email to the HR department, attaching some of the most damning evidence. Photos of Marcus and Sarah together, screenshots of their texts, and a note explaining how Marcus's affair could tarnish the company's image. I made sure to mention his promotion too, just to twist the knife a little deeper. And then I sent it. I can't lie. I felt a certain satisfaction as I clicked send. I knew they had no idea what was coming. Every time Sarah came home late or canceled plans, I thought about how close I was to seeing them both pay for what they'd done. She had no clue what was building beneath the surface. And Marcus? He hadn't called me in weeks. He was probably too busy enjoying my wife to even think about his so-called best friend. Revenge isn't something you rush. Takes patience. Cold, calculated patience. And I wasn't about to let my emotions take control. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. This had to be perfect. It had to hurt them where it mattered most. After I sent the email to Marcus's HR department, I didn't just sit back and wait. I kept collecting more evidence, making sure every angle was covered. Kevin continued to follow them, handing me new dirt every few days. Every new piece felt like another nail in their coffin. I knew their every move, where they went, what they did. They were becoming bolder, more reckless, like they thought they were untouchable. And then there was social media. They thought they were being clever, posting vague photos, sunsets, wine glasses, and fancy dinners. But if you paid attention, the pieces fit together perfectly. Marcus would post a picture from a work event, holding a glass of wine, and an hour later Sarah would post something eerily similar, the same location, the same damn glass of wine. It was almost laughable, like they were daring someone to figure it out. I took screenshots of everything. Timestamps, comments, everything that tied them together. It was all part of the plan. Marcus had built his entire image around being the perfect family man, the devoted husband and loving father. He used that image to climb the corporate ladder, earning respect and admiration from everyone around him. But it was all a lie, and I was about to tear it all down. Marcus wasn't just some guy at the office. He had ambitions, big ones. He loved talking about how he was on track for that promotion, how he was practically untouchable. Everyone admired him. He was the golden boy, but no one knew the truth. No one except me. And that's where I would strike. I was going to strike. Marcus's career was his Achilles heel, the thing he cared about more than anything. And I was going to tear it down piece by piece. But before I unleashed chaos at work, I needed to prime the rest of our social circle. The truth was too big to drop all at once. I had to let it leak, slowly and deliberately, planting seeds of doubt before delivering the final blow. So I began subtly weaving suspicion into conversations with our mutual friends. Nothing too direct, just small, offhand comments like, "Have you noticed Marcus has been acting a little strange lately?" Or, "I haven't seen much of Sarah these days. She's been working late a lot." I wasn't accusing anyone outright, just nudging their curiosity. People love gossip, especially when they think they're in on a secret. And once those seeds were planted, it didn't take long for whispers to start circulating. Before I knew it, those whispers started coming back to me. Friends began asking questions, their voices dripping with curiosity. I played my role as the concerned husband to perfection. "Yeah, things have been a little rough lately," I'd say, lowering my voice like I was confiding something deeply personal. "I don't know what's going on with Sarah, but we're trying to work through it." It was all part of the setup. I wasn't just aiming at Marcus's career. I wanted to dismantle everything that mattered to him. His friendships, his colleagues, his family. I wanted him to feel isolated, like the walls were closing in from every direction. Marcus had always been the guy who had it all together, the one everyone looked up to. By the time I was done, no one would trust him and no one would want to be around him. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on his work situation. I knew HR had received my anonymous email, but I wasn't in a rush. I wanted them to dig into things on their own and uncover the cracks for themselves. While I waited, I kept collecting more dirt. Every new piece of evidence felt like another nail in his coffin. One particularly satisfying moment came when I had a casual chat with Marcus's wife. It was a surreal experience, sitting across from the woman who had no idea what was happening behind her back. She still thought her husband was the perfect family man. She gushed about him, telling me how lucky she was to have such a supportive, hard-working husband. I had to fight the urge to laugh. I kept my face neutral, nodding along and offering polite comments, but inside, I was savoring every second. Any guilt I might have felt evaporated the moment I remembered the photos, the texts, the betrayal. Marcus didn't think twice about destroying my life, so why should I spare his? As the weeks passed, the tension grew. Marcus and Sarah kept up their charade, acting like nothing was wrong. But people started to notice the awkwardness between Marcus and me. Mutual friends would ask why we weren't hanging out like we used to. I'd shrug and give a vague answer like, "People change, I guess." I could see the curiosity in their eyes. They were dying to know what was really going on. Soon enough, they'd get the full story. Finally, after weeks of preparation, it was time to set everything in motion. Revenge isn't just about hitting back. It's about timing. You have to strike when it'll hurt the most, when the impact will ripple out to everyone involved. And that's exactly what I had in mind. I planned an event, a big one. It wasn't enough for Sarah and Marcus to suffer in private. No, they needed to be exposed in front of everyone they cared about. It took weeks of careful planning, but I rented a swanky venue. One of those upscale places used for corporate events and milestone celebrations. Everything about it had to look professional and innocent, like it was just another friendly gathering. I sent out invites to all the key players, our mutual friends, colleagues, and even a few of Marcus's higher-ups from work. If I was going to destroy him, it had to be in front of the people whose opinions mattered most to him. I didn't stop there. I invited Sarah's family too. Her parents had always supported us, and I knew this would hit them hard. They deserved to know what their daughter had been up to. I made sure everyone with any connection to our lives was there. No one would escape what was about to unfold. In the days leading up to the event, I rehearsed my speech over and over again. Couldn't just be an angry rant. It had to be calm, composed, and filled with irrefutable facts. I had everything ready. The photos, the videos, the texts. I had them printed, organized, and prepared to display on the big screen. I even hired a tech guy to ensure there wouldn't be any glitches. This had to be flawless. The night of the event, the air buzzed with excitement. People laughed, drank, and chatted about work and family like it was just another ordinary night. Sarah played the part of the perfect wife, smiling and talking to everyone like she didn't have a care in the world. Marcus was working the room like a seasoned pro, shaking hands and laughing, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. I watched them from across the room, keeping my distance, letting them enjoy their last moments of normalcy. They had no idea their worlds were about to come crashing down. It was almost sickeningly amusing to watch their confidence, to see how sure they were that they had gotten away with everything. They had no idea what was coming. As the moment drew closer, I made my way to the front of the room. The lights dimmed, and the hum of conversation gradually faded as all eyes turned to me. I tapped the microphone and cleared my throat, taking a steadying breath before I began. "I just want to thank all of you for being here tonight." I started, my voice calm but firm. "It really means a lot to me to have you all, friends, family, colleagues, gathered here." I paused for a moment, letting my words hang in the air, drawing them in. "Lately, I've been doing a lot of thinking," I continued, keeping my tone steady. "Thinking about what real friendship means, what trust really is, and how important it is to know that the people closest to you will stand by you, no matter what." From the corner of my eye, I saw Sarah glance at me, her face flickering with confusion. Marcus, standing near the back, started shifting uncomfortably. "Good. And that's why," I said, letting my voice harden just a little, "I feel it's time to share something with all of you. Something personal. Something that's been weighing on me for a while." I signaled to the tech guy at the back of the room. The screen behind me lit up, and the first image appeared. Sarah and Marcus walking hand in hand outside a restaurant. The reaction from the crowd was immediate. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Sarah's face went pale, and Marcus's confident grin dissolved faster than I could have imagined. But I didn't give them a chance to react. "This," I said, pointing to the screen, "is my wife and my best friend, caught sneaking around behind my back." I kept going, my voice unwavering as photo after photo flashed across the screen. Images of them laughing together, hugging, and walking into a hotel. The room was dead silent except for the sound of whispered disbelief. Then came the texts, screenshots of their private conversations. Flirty messages, jokes at my expense, secret plans to meet up. It was all there, undeniable and inescapable. Sarah tried to speak, her voice shaky. This isn't what you think," she stammered, but no one believed her. Marcus didn't even try to defend himself. He just stood there, frozen, the weight of everything crashing down on him in real time. I could see it in his eyes. He was scrambling, trying to figure out how to salvage this in front of his colleagues, his friends, his family. But it was too late. The silence broke, and chaos erupted. People started muttering, then shouting. Friends I'd known for years turned their anger on Sarah and Marcus, demanding answers. Some turned to me, offering their support. I didn't need it, though. This wasn't about pity or sympathy. This was about ensuring they both paid for what they'd done. Sarah's parents sat in the front row, their faces a portrait of shock and devastation. Her mother was trying to hold back tears, while her father just shook his head in disbelief, muttering something under his breath. For a brief moment, I almost felt bad for them. But then I remembered the photos, the texts, the betrayal. Whatever pain they were feeling, it wasn't my fault. It was hers. The crowd divided. Some people gathered around me, murmuring kind words and asking if I was okay. Others turned on Sarah and Marcus, demanding explanations they couldn't give. Sarah, wide-eyed and panicked, tried to approach me. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Can we talk about this? It's not what you think." I stepped back, shaking my head. My voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "There's nothing left to talk about, Sarah. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it." Marcus, meanwhile, stood in the corner like a deer caught in headlights. He knew it was over. Everything he'd worked for, all the relationships he'd built, his carefully crafted reputation was crumbling before his eyes. The people he'd been trying so hard to impress all night were now whispering amongst themselves, shaking their heads, distancing themselves from him. His entire life had been built on a lie, and in a matter of minutes, it all came crashing down. I let them stew in it. I watched as Sarah started crying, pleading with anyone who would listen. But no one cared anymore. Marcus slunk further into the background, his mind probably spinning as he tried to figure out how to put the pieces of his shattered image back together. As the night wore on, people began to leave, shaking their heads in disbelief. A few came over to me, telling me I did the right thing, that they were proud of me for standing up for myself. But I didn't feel proud. I felt hollow, like everything I'd built had gone up in flames. Still, at least it was over. The fallout spread like wildfire. Within days, Marcus's affair was the talk of his office. Everyone knew. Thanks to my well-timed email, his promotion was immediately revoked, and I heard rumors they were considering firing him altogether. The company couldn't afford the bad press. As for Sarah, she lost more than just her reputation. Her family turned on her. Friends she'd known for years cut ties. She tried to reach out to me, texting, calling, even showing up at the house. But I ignored her every time. The damage was done, and there was no coming back from it. Life after the scandal was like watching a wildfire burn everything in its path. Everything they'd built, everything they thought they'd get away with, it all turned to ash. They had built a life of lies, and in the end, it was all reduced to ash. Sarah and Marcus lost everything, and honestly, I couldn't say they didn't deserve it. Let's start with Marcus. He'd always been so smug, so full of himself, strutting around like his career made him untouchable. But the truth has a way of catching up with you, and in Marcus's case, it hit like a freight train. Word spread fast, faster than even I expected. His bosses caught wind of the affair, and in a company like his, they couldn't afford a public scandal. The promotion he'd been bragging about for months? Gone. Just like that, his career was in shambles. Last I heard, they let him go quietly, hoping to avoid too much attention. No announcements, no drama, just a swift boot out the door. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. His carefully crafted image as the office golden boy? Shattered. The people who once admired and trusted him? They couldn't look him in the eye anymore. No one wanted to associate with a man who betrayed not only his wife but his best friend too. And his family, that perfect picture he loved to flaunt, crumbled just as quickly. His wife found out about everything. Sarah, the lies, all of it. She didn't hesitate. She took the kids, packed up, and left. From what I've heard, she's already filed for divorce. Marcus's life was reduced to rubble, all because of his selfishness, his arrogance, and his inability to keep his hands to himself. And Sarah? She didn't fare any better. Her family, who always saw her as the perfect daughter, the picture of poise and integrity, couldn't handle the truth. Her parents were devastated, humiliated by her actions. They barely knew how to face their friends after what she'd done. Friends we'd known for years, people who had supported her, admired her, cut her off without hesitation. She became a pariah, the woman who destroyed her marriage and obliterated a lifelong friendship in the process. As for me, I didn't waste my time responding to her attempts to reach out. Of course, she tried calls, texts, even showing up at my door in tears, begging me to forgive her. But I wasn't interested in her excuses. She made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. There was no coming back from this, and she knew it. Part of me felt a bitter satisfaction watching the two of them unravel, burdened by the guilt and the consequences of their actions. They earned every ounce of pain they were feeling. But that satisfaction didn't last. After the dust settled, I was left with the emotional wreckage. The toll of betrayal was heavier than I ever imagined. For a long time, I kept to myself. I avoided the people who reminded me of what had happened, not ready to face a world that had turned completely upside down. I spent months trying to process everything, wondering how I'd been so blind, so trusting. It was hard. Some days it felt impossible. But eventually, I realized I couldn't stay in that place forever. I needed to move forward. Slowly, I began putting myself back out there, meeting new people. People who didn't know the backstory, who didn't see me as the guy who got played. I started trusting again, little by little. Piece by piece, I rebuilt my life. The scars didn't fade completely. They never do. There are still days when the old wounds ache. When I think about the life I thought I was building and the trust one once had in Sarah and Marcus. But when the pain creeps in, I remind myself of how far I've come. I'm no longer the man who was betrayed. I'm the man who survived. Looking back, I've learned so much. I've realized how fragile trust really is and how easily people can destroy it without a second thought. But I've also learned something important, something I wish I'd understood sooner. You can't control other people's actions. You can't make them love you or stay loyal no matter how much you give. The only thing you can control is how you respond when everything falls apart. For a while, I blamed myself. I wondered if I wasn't enough, if I'd missed the warning signs. But that kind of thinking is a trap. Their betrayal wasn't about me. It was about them, their selfishness, their lack of honesty, their inability to value what they had. Once I accepted that, I was able to let go of the guilt, the anger, and the bitterness. If there's one thing I've taken away from all this, it's that you have to value yourself. You have to know your worth and never let anyone make you feel like you're less than you are. Because at the end of the day, the only person who will always have your back is you. And that's enough. So here I am, moving forward on my own terms. I'm not looking for love right now, and maybe I never will. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I've learned to be content with who I am, without needing someone else to make me feel whole. And honestly, that's the best revenge I could ever ask for.